Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on some really complex, hyper-strategic information.
The kind of stuff that really moves the needle.
Exactly. For national security, for global finance, and we're going to try and distill it, right down to its absolute signal. And what we're looking at today isn't just a collection of documents.
No, not at all.
The source material itself presents this as a unified, single, what do they call it? A deterministic engine for G7 national survival and wealth preservation.
That's the phrase.
So we're doing a deep dive into the AETHELRED-SANGUINE unified sovereign architecture.
And that phrase, deterministic engine, that's really the key to the whole thing. You absolutely have to treat this entire stack of material, from the technical WASM specs all the way to the geopolitical forecasting, not as separate files,
but as one thing.
As one indivisible framework. It's all bound by something the architects call a hyperaxiomatic mandate. Our mission today is to really understand what they see as the only viable path to achieving sovereign certainty.
In a world that's already, for all intents and purposes, post-quantum.
It is. And this entire structure, it's driven by what they define as the Luciferian directive.
Which sounds intense.
It is. It means the absolute non-negotiable demand for 100% signal and 0% noise.
That's exceptionally intense language.
Yeah.
And it immediately makes you ask why? Why the hyperbole? Mm-hmm. Why is this level of, absolute certainty suddenly mandatory? I think we have to jump right into the existential threat that created this whole thing.
We have to.
Let's talk about the quantum decryption cliff.
Yes, because the cliff, it isn't some theoretical threat for, the next decade. It's a time-bound countdown to total systemic failure. The immediate problem is this strategy that adversarial state actors have already put into play. They call it harvest now, decrypt later, HNDL.
And the numbers we're seeing attached to this, they're just hard to even wrap your head around.
They are staggering. The reports confirm that over, 4.2 exabytes of highly sensitive G7, US, and EU data has already been captured.
4.2 exabytes.
Yeah. And it's just sitting there siloed in these hardened, cooled storage facilities all over the globe.
Just try to picture that volume for a second. What does 4.2 exabytes even look like?
It's like storing nearly 1 million hard drives, each one packed with a full terabyte of data.
And this isn't just random data.
Oh no, this is the crown jewels. Classified intelligence, financial transactions, R&D blueprints for next-gen tech, diplomatic cables, all of it encrypted with our current classical methods.
And it's all just sitting there waiting.
Waiting.
For the one event that breaks absolutely everything.
Correct. It's waiting for Q-Day, the day the first stable, fault-tolerant quantum computer becomes operational.
And the timeline on that is? It's not some distant future, is it?
Not at all. The projections are getting really, really tight. We're looking at a window between, say, 2026 and 2028.
That's practically tomorrow.
It is. And once an adversary can field a machine with, let's say, 4,000 or more logical qubits.
The logical is the key word there, right? The stable ones.
Mm-hmm. The stable, error-corrected quips you need for a complex task like this. Once that happens, that entire historical data archive, it becomes completely transparent.
So we're not just talking about securing the future. This is a complete retroactive compromise of the past.
Everything. This leads right into what the documents call the glasshouse effect.
Okay, unpack that for us.
It's simple, really. Look at our global financial and sovereign infrastructure today, 94% of it.
94.
It all relies on classical public key cryptography, things like RSA and ECC that, protect your online banking.
That's stuff we've used for decades.
And it's robust in a classical computing world. But against quantum attack, using something like Shor's algorithm, it's fragile. It shatters.
So that reliance on outdated crypto, that's the glass house.
That's the glass house. The walls are invisible, and the adversary already has the key. They just need the right tool to pick the lock.
And the consequence of this isn't just a data breach. It's bigger than that. It's the erosion of a foundational concept of how states operate.
The source material is completely unequivocal on this. The moment Q-Day arrives, the very concept of the state secret for any transmission sent over the last, say, 2 decades,
it's gone.
It just ceases to exist, which means defense has to pivot entirely.
You can't just build higher walls.
No, we can no longer focus on perimeter defense, which is all about keeping people out. We have to pivot to absolute mathematically provable provenance verification, and post-quantum encryption. The certainty of the data itself is the new currency.
Okay, so the moment the state secret becomes obsolete, the whole game changes. The arms race isn't about bombs anymore.
It shifts completely. It moves away from brute force or even just raw computational speed to absolute informational certainty.
Right.
And this is the core of what they call the quantum supremacy axiom. The new race is defined by who achieves the lowest unsolved variable count, the UVC.
Lowest UVC, so the fewest unknowns.
Exactly. If you have low UVC, you have certainty. And certainty in this new world translates directly into power. The axiom is very clear. The first nation to achieve 10,000 logical qubits effectively owns the global ledger.
That sounds less like a military threat and more like total financial and informational dominance.
It's both. But the emphasis is really on algorithmic dominance, owning the global ledger. That means you can reverse engineer financial movements, you can predict market crashes with certainty, you can calculate the risk profiles across entire sovereign debt markets long before anyone else even sees the storm coming.
You get what they call an asymmetric epistemic advantage.
A knowledge-based edge. The ability to price in future volatility before it even registers in classical markets. It's pure strategic alpha derived from mathematical proof.
Okay, but this source material, it's really aggressive in how it assesses our current defense strategies. It doesn't seem to allow for any kind of gradual upgrade or, half measures.
None, precisely. They set an incredibly high bar for what constitutes a viable defense. They call it the DARPA exceedance benchmark.
And this benchmark is what defines the minimum necessary capability to stay ahead in the quantum era.
That's right.
And the sources pretty much say that any defense system that doesn't meet this standard is, their word, childish by comparison. Now, isn't that just extreme hyperbole? Aren't they just trying to push for rapid adoption?
It reads like that, I know. It sounds like hyperbole, but they're citing a measurable gap. When they say childish, they mean it in a mathematical sense, mathematically junior.
Okay.
So if your current system requires, say, n computational steps to be broken in a classical world, and a quantum computer can do it in the square root of n steps, or just factor it instantly, then that system is fundamentally demonstrably weak.
It fails the certainty test.
Completely. The DARPA exceedance standard demands defenses that push the computational work for the adversary back toward infinity, even with quantum accelerators. It's all about achieving near zero UVC, which is just impossible with what they call junior level implementation.
Let's apply that standard to something that isn't digital. Physical defense. Because the sources talk about the immediate, really dramatic erosion of defense and new threat vectors. I was floored by the section on the physical death of stealth.
This is a massive, massive strategic pivot point. The threat here comes from the development of quantum sensing technology, specifically systems based on nitrogen vacancy centers, NV centers, for quantum gravimetry.
Okay, that sounds incredibly complex. For those of us listening, can you break down what quantum gravimetry actually is?
Sure. Think of it as an incredibly, almost impossibly sensitive scale. Gravimeters measure tiny local variations in gravity. Classical ones are pretty sensitive, but quantum gravimetry, using these NV centers in diamonds, it achieves a sensitivity that's orders of magnitude higher.
Orders of magnitude.
Yeah. It can detect the subtle, localized gravitational anomaly caused by a really significant mass moving somewhere beneath the surface.
And that mass is what? A submarine?
The nuclear submarine, the invisible leg of the nuclear triad, the ultimate second strike deterrent.
So they're becoming detectable.
They are, via these minute local gravity anomalies.
Which means the billions, maybe trillions of dollars invested in low acoustic signature vessels, the Columbia-class programs.
Yeah.
They could be obsolete before they're even fully operational.
Potentially, yeah. The very definition of stealth has changed practically overnight.
Traditional stealth is dead.
It's obsolete, making things quieter, reducing radar cross-section. That's the old way. The required strategic pivot now is away from hiding the object itself and toward what the sources are calling quantum ghosting.
Okay, how do you ghost a multi-thousand-ton submarine? That sounds impossible.
You obscure its signal in the quantum noise field. Quantum ghosting means you're actively generating false gravimetric signatures. You use entangled decoy signals and localized quantum field manipulation to create a signature that looks chaotic or just plain false to the adversary's NV sensors.
So you're not hiding the sub.
No, you're creating so many false positive gravitational signatures that the adversary just can't distinguish the real one from all the decoys.
That's the physical side. But the digital frontier is just as challenged. We have to talk about the most, insidious digital threat this architecture is designed to defeat?
Quantum-resistant tier zero exploitation. QRTE.
Right.
QRTE is the adversary's method for using quantum principles to go after tier zero infrastructure, the absolute core pipelines of global data. The reports specifically highlight that adversaries are attempting entanglement intercepts at transoceanic cable repeaters.
Let's unpack that. Entanglement intercept. It sounds like science fiction. How can you tap a fiber optic cable without leaving a single trace?
It exploits quantum non-locality. That's the key. Quantum non-locality. It means that two entangled particles, even if they're separated by a huge distance, can instantaneously influence each other.
Right. Einstein's spooky action at a distance.
Exactly. The adversary uses this to detect the act of observation without actually changing the classical physical state of the light in the fiber optic cable.
So if they don't alter the classical state,
then the classical intrusion detection systems, your firewalls, your network monitors, they have absolutely no way of knowing a tap has occurred.
so the adversary creates a perfect invisible wiretap.
A perfect one.
Your systems are all green, telling you the link is 100% secure, but the signal is being copied and analyzed somewhere else simultaneously.
Precisely. You are being perfectly watched, and your own systems, because they operate under the rules of classical physics, are completely blind to the intrusion. This just necessitates absolute physical law-based integrity.
Okay, so if the invisible wiretap is the problem, what is the mandatory countermeasure that Ethelred prescribes?
It's a two-pronged approach. First, you have to have mandatory implementation of quantum key distribution QKD via a satellite mesh.
And QKD uses the laws of physics themselves as the defense.
It does. It uses the no cloning theorem, the fact that it's impossible to perfectly copy an unknown quantum state. Any attempt to observe the key transmission collapses the quantum state.
And the system knows instantly.
Instantly. It knows the key has been compromised.
But the sources are clear that QKD, even though it's essential, isn't enough on its own. The data packets themselves need another layer of protection.
Correct. The data packets have to be encapsulated in what are called lattice-based cryptographic envelopes, LBC.
Which is one of the leading candidates for post-quantum cryptography.
It is. It relies on the mathematical hardness of finding short vectors in these really high-dimensional lattices.
And the requirement for this LBC envelope is extremely specific.
It mandates a mathematical complexity so high it would require a classical supercomputer 2 to the 256th power operations to crack.
Which is basically forever.
It is. But the real innovation here isn't just the math, it's the protocol. The system is engineered to physically destroy the encapsulated data packet upon any unauthorized quantum observation attempt.
So it uses the attack against itself.
Exactly. It uses the very quantum observation that would compromise the key to trigger the destruction of the payload. It's a self-destructing data architecture.
So it prioritizes zero compromise over the continuity of the data flow.
Absolutely. If integrity cannot be guaranteed, the signal must be erased.
That moves us from defending the wire to defending the host machine itself. If the external environment is hostile and the data is self-destructing, you need an internal environment that is, well, mathematically pure. We're transitioning now. We're moving from defending against these external quantum threats to addressing the inherent fragility of our current systems.
And it is an almost embarrassingly simple fragility.
The sources are incredibly harsh on this. They call current enterprise security a managed compromise.
Which is really the core of what they define as tier 1 fragility. I mean, look at what plagues modern software. Buffer overflows, where you try to stuff too much information into a small container. Use after free errors, where you're using memory after it's been released.
These aren't exotic quantum era bugs.
No, these are, as they say, childish vulnerabilities that we've known how to exploit for decades.
And they persist because our current systems, they're built on these massive monolithic code bases, and I guess the hope that the code will just execute perfectly in runtime.
Exactly. They rely on an assumption of perfect execution, which is just demonstrably false time and time again. So Ethelred's solution is to just exit this cycle completely, migrate all critical tier 0 logic.
So anything affecting national infrastructure, classified data?
All of it. Into the Ethelred WASM final firewall. This is what they call the WASM mandate.
Okay, so why WebAssembly? Why WASM, and why is this migration mandatory?
Because it enforces what they call verifiable zero-runtime error execution. This is the core axiom of this whole section.
And that axiom is?
If a state transition cannot be mathematically proven as safe, and I mean using rigorous mathematical proof systems like Coq or Isabelle, to confirm the code will behave exactly as intended.
It never runs.
It is never allowed to execute. It eliminates entire classes of vulnerabilities before the code even gets a chance to run.
That is a huge shift. Instead of waiting for bugs to pop up in testing or, in production, you have a mathematical proof guaranteeing safety from the start.
A formal proof.
So how does the architecture actually achieve that level of provable safety in a practical computing environment?
It relies on some really fundamental architectural pillars that just redefine the environment itself. First is WASM linear memory isolation.
Okay.
A WASM module is designed to operate in what's called a shared nothing environment. It exists in its own tiny little universe. It has zero intrinsic access to the host machine's file system or its network or any external memory.
Unless you explicitly give it permission.
Unless it's granted an explicit cryptographically signed capability token.
Yes, and that directly addresses the problem of lateral movement, which is how most big breaches escalate. Right?
Precisely. The module is completely isolated. Its entire operational space is limited to a small contained memory segment. The blast radius of any potential exploit is strictly contained within a self-destructing 4 GB linear memory segment.
A 4 gig segment.
That's it. If the system detects any anomaly, any deviation from that mathematical proof, that 4 gig segment just purges itself.
So lateral movement, jumping from one memory space to the next.
It's physically and architecturally impossible.
Okay, so pillar one is isolation. The second pillar is about efficiency, but the source frames it as a security mandate. Perfect zero sizing delta, or PZSD.
PZSD is the practical implementation of the Luciferian directive we talked about. 100% signal, 0% noise. PZSD means the binary footprint of the deployed code is reduced by 92% compared to, say, traditional containerized solutions.
And why is size a security feature?
Because every unnecessary line of code, every unused function, every single byte of noise is a potential adversarial vector. It's a surface for them to attack.
So by starving the system of complexity, you eliminate the attack surface.
You eliminate its security through ruthless simplification.
Even with that pure slim architecture, the system still has to defend against these QRTE attacks that target the execution process itself, not just flaws in the code. We're talking about speculative attacks.
Yes. Speculative execution vulnerabilities like we saw with Spectre and Meltdown. They rely on forcing the processor to execute code paths incorrectly and then leaking memory data through side-channel timing analysis.
And adversaries can now simulate this with quantum clusters to predict memory layouts.
They can, which is why AETHELRED's countermeasure is dual-layered and extremely time-sensitive.
So layer one is temporal fencing. What is that in practical terms?
Temporal fencing is a mandated hardware-level intervention. Normally, processors use speculative execution to predict what instruction is coming next to maximize speed. Temporal fencing just stops that. It implements a mandatory timeout, a hardware fence, between every single memory load instruction.
Every single one.
Every one. And the specified mitigation delay is 300 microseconds.
Why 300 microseconds specifically? What does that achieve?
It prevents the attacker from ever gaining a stable reference point in time. A speculative attack requires the adversary to measure the time difference between successful and failed memory loads over and over again to build an accurate map of the system's memory.
And the fence messes with their timing.
By introducing a mandatory, unpredictable fence, the adversary can't stabilize their reference point. The signal they get back is essentially just corrupted noise.
Okay, and layer two, multiple address lattice shifting, malloc. Yeah. It's constantly moving the target.
That's right. Malloc ensures that any tiny piece of memory offset information that does happen to leak during that tiny window is immediately obsolete. The WASM environment is periodically shuffled in memory. Its starting address is changed within that 300 microsecond window.
So it's like trying to hit a moving target that also teleports every time you aim.
It's a great analogy. Malloc maintains system integrity by ensuring the environment literally refuses to stand still long enough to be targeted.
This whole quest for 100% signal purity, it leads to one of the most provocative mandates in the entire source: the deprecation of human linguistics and core defense logic.
The goal of machine superiority in the quantum syntax. It is the ultimate expression of the Luciferian directive. The sources argue that human-readable code Java, C++8, even something safer like Rust, is inherently ambiguous.
How so?
Human language introduces vulnerabilities because it relies on human interpretation, on comments, on conventional syntax, all of which are exploitable.
So if they're ripping human-readable code out of the kernel, what are they replacing it with?
Pure mathematics. The AETHELRED kernel uses a non-human readable machine syntax. It ingests logic based on really complex mathematical structures, tensor calculus, lattice field equations, non-commutative operator dynamic,
And it takes that in as raw bytecode.
directly into the sovereign sandbox.
The purpose is just functional, security through mathematical precision.
Exactly. It achieves what they call an ECS of 100.0100.0, the axiomatic absolute in terms of signal integrity, because there's just no human ambiguity to exploit. And this non-human syntax is also mandated for implementing the post-quantum cryptography itself, specifically Kyber 7 lattice-based cryptography,
So even the crypto algorithms are running in this pure state.
using the precision of the hypertensor execution kernel. Yes.
So, okay, the system is mathematically guaranteed to be sound, the environment is isolated, and it's constantly shifting. That secures the infrastructure. But we still need to secure the human using the system.
Right, because if the infrastructure is isolated and it's running on a quantum syntax kernel, the weakest link is still the person logging in.
Always.
And QRKE doesn't just target data, it targets identity.
Absolutely. The problem they identify in the reports is that even our classical hardware security modules, the HSMs, the little chips that protect your identity keys,
Yeah.
even they're vulnerable to side-channel timing attacks. And these attacks can facilitate identity cloning. In a post-quantum world, a static digital ID it's worthless.
You need something more dynamic.
You need a deterministic identity framework that is entangled with the user's physical presence and their behavior.
Which brings us to AETHEL-ID, the biometric lattice hybrid entanglement. This is a post-quantum deterministic identity. Instead of your ID token being a simple key or a hash, it's defined as an entanglement, a singular unified proof of a biometric lattice signature and a digital signature.
So they're tied together mathematically.
And they cannot be separated or forged independently.
That entanglement must require multiple, really complex identity vectors. Well, what are the specific metrics that AETHEL-ID is using?
It uses two critical layers. The first is a highly granular biometric vector, multispectral iris lattice mapping.
So that's more than just a simple iris scan.
Oh, much more. It maps the microscopic lattice structure of the eye using multiple spectrums of light. It creates a template that is just impossible to replicate with a photograph or even a sophisticated deepfake.
And the second layer, I'm guessing that protects against the classic gun to the head scenario where you just force someone to scan their eye.
That's exactly where the behavioral vector comes in, cognitive savant gate and keystroke dynamics. The system analyzes the subconscious physical patterns that are unique to the user, the minute timing variations in how they walk, their balance, the precise pressure and speed with which they type on a keyboard.
So it's verifying the user's operational state, their cognitive signature.
Not just their physical print. Yes, if your biometric data is a perfect match, but your keystroke speed is all wrong, access is denied.
And the encryption standard for this entangled identity, it must be incredibly advanced.
It mandates the use of PQC Kyber 10024, but it's deployed in what they call entangled zero-knowledge proof mode, EZKP.
Zero knowledge proof. That's where you can prove you have a secret without actually revealing the secret.
Exactly. And EZKP extends this, allowing the system to verify this hybrid entangled identity across sovereign borders for, say, high-security transit or financial verification.
Without ever exposing the underlying biometric or digital signature data.
Correct.
So we've established the defense and the identity integrity. But AETHELRED is also designed to be highly proactive. This takes us to the red in AETHELRED, the anticipating the Black Swan engine.
AETHELRED queues.
Right.
And this is where the architecture moves from simple defense to what you could call geopolitical sentience. The QS engine monitors systemic divergence on a global scale. It uses non-traditional high-alpha indicators to predict catastrophic Black Swan events before they even appear in classical financial or diplomatic reports.
And there's a real urgency attached to this in the documents. They state that the Black Swan probability density has breached the 75% threshold.
It has.
What does that 75% mean in practical terms?
It means we are in a very high-risk operational environment. When that density score hits 75%, it's a signal that the interconnected, complex systems that govern global markets and geopolitics. They're moving into a state of severe instability.
So it makes an imminent, catastrophic systemic shock highly probable.
That's right. The system is essentially telling the G7 to brace for massive disruption.
And this engine relies on 4 hyperspecific data points, the 4 axiomatic markers, to calculate that density score. Let's break these down, starting with the flow of high-value people.
That's human asset liquidity, HAL. This is the quantified movement of critical human capital across borders.
So quantum researchers, high-frequency trading architects.
Top-tier engineers. The system sees this as knowledge-based preservation. If the brightest minds in strategic sectors are quietly moving themselves and their assets out of a country, AETHELRED infers this as a precursor to state-level collapse or conflict or some profound legislative shock.
In the system's recommendation
is mandatory hedging via HAL derivatives, essentially investing in the migration itself.
That is a chilling indicator. The second marker measures the gap between what governments say and what's actually happening on the ground.
This is quantum epistemic divergence, or QEP.
Epistemic meaning knowledge.
Right. So the QEP measures the gap between the official state narrative, what they call PHI, think government press releases, state media, and the actual quantum telemetry, PSI. The raw data flows, the encrypted intercepts, the market movements.
So if that gap, the QEP, is rising,
it means the public story and the quantum reality are moving dangerously far apart, which signals deception and extremely high risk.
The third marker tracks hidden money, subsurface financial flows, SSF.
SSF tracks dark pool liquidity shifts. These are huge, often non-reported transactions that happen just before major legislative or market shocks. And the sources observe a clear trend. Major institutional players are deleveraging traditional sovereign debt. They're shedding government bonds.
In favor of what?
In favor of highly liquid, non-custodial quantum assets. It signals a major institutional preparation for a hard reset of the global credit architecture. They're anticipating a devaluation of sovereign currency.
And finally, a linguistic marker that detects a shift to conflict readiness.
Neo-language polarization, NLP. This is essentially an automated, massive red flag system for the language of war. NLP tracks a phase shift in state media syntax. If the dialogue shifts dramatically from benign terms like economic competition to the high-stakes existential language of survival, homeland defense, or existential threat,
the QS engine flags it
as a critical predictive indicator of imminent kinetic or cyber conflict.
This is such a powerful system that, of course, the reports show adversaries are trying to actively corrupt its input.
Injecting ghost signals.
Right.
This is the QRTE strategy, but applied to predictive modeling. Adversaries use Shor's derivative clusters' quantum-enabled computational power to inject simulated false data into the classical data pipelines.
Why? What's the goal?
They're trying to trigger automated liquidity cascades. They want the AETHELRED system to panic, to cause a major market shock, so the adversary can then swoop in and buy up devalued assets.
So how does AETHELRED protect its own inputs from being fooled?
The countermeasure is 2 layers of mandatory verification. First, lattice-based signature validation on all incoming telemetry,
which guarantees the data is from where it says it's from,
with post-quantum certainty. And second, and this is crucial, epistemic shielding.
What exactly is that shield?
Epistemic shielding is a noise injection layer applied to the AETHELRED QS system's own signal footprint. It makes sure that quantum adversaries can't observe what the system is observing.
Because if they know what indicators you're prioritizing,
they can game the system. Epistemic shielding masks the system's intent, maintaining total cognitive dominance over the adversary's own predictive models.
So we've built the technical case.
Yeah.
But the last piece of this deep dive is what makes this source material so unique. It frames this hyper-advanced security not as an overhead cost, but as a vehicle for leveraged investment. And this is where the narrative pivots pretty dramatically. The sources argue that high-level security, it isn't a liability sink. It's the ultimate alpha investment.
Exactly. The core thesis is that security is a leveraged investment. In a world where you have total informational certainty, the ability to prevent a systemic failure is capital creation. The estimated annual capital preservation, which is really liability avoidance for G7 stakeholders that implement this framework, is quantified at a massive figure.
What are we talking about?
$1.2 billion. That's the value of the protected cryptographic assets and the immunity against a systemic critical infrastructure collapse.
So they're framing the potential loss of that infrastructure as a quantifiable liability that is immediately avoided by just implementing AETHELRED.
Absolutely. And the documents go further. They connect the deployment of this architecture directly to accelerating the architect's own specific financial objectives.
Right, the $30 liquid net worth target.
And while that's a personal benchmark, it illustrates a broader principle. The development and deployment of a defense architecture that achieves sovereign certainty is a highly lucrative business model.
It enables what they call epistemic arbitrage.
Capitalizing on the strategic alpha you get from the QS engine and securing high-throughput contracts for G7 defense needs.
The sanguine part of this architecture, though, it addresses something far more urgent than financial arbitrage.
Critical infrastructure immunity.
Right.
Project Sanguine is designed to neutralize the most terrifying threat of the cyber era, the cyberkinetic fatality vector.
When a cyber attack causes physical death.
It does. And the sources give a chilling, very grounded example. A 5-minute outage in an ambulance dispatch system, an EHS system, in a major city like Toronto equals 12 preventable deaths.
12 deaths in 5 minutes.
Yeah. When a cyber attack directly translates into that, we've crossed a threshold into existential system failure.
Which means the sanguine solution has to guarantee service continuity no matter what, even if the main power grid goes down.
The solution is to create these highly resilient, mesh-networked autonomous dispatch nodes. The emergency fleet ambulances, fire trucks, critical services. It operates as a self-healing organism.
It detaches itself from the vulnerable grid.
It detaches its operational certainty from the vulnerable legacy Tier 1 infrastructure. If the grid fails, the fleet maintains connectivity through peer-to-peer routing and lattice-signed keys. It ensures dispatch instructions and navigation are guaranteed to be delivered and proven authentic.
So we have the technical immunity and the financial acceleration.
Yeah.
But there's a final, highly strategic layer here. Legal immunization. The reports detail how the architects have basically weaponized the legal system to protect the framework itself.
The Sovereign Legal Immunization Framework, SLF 2025, is a mandatory shield. And the focus here is on defending the intellectual capital and ensuring the architecture can be adopted by sovereign entities without legal roadblocks.
And the core strategy for this legal shield is something called prior art saturation.
This is a very shrewd maneuver. By publicly and officially releasing the core AETHELRED-SANGUINE frameworks and methodologies, the architects establish prior art.
Now, why is that so important?
It's essential for G7's strategic continuity. It legally blocks adversarial state actors, or even just private patent trolls, from trying to patent or monopolize these critical post-quantum cryptography methods.
Which would stifle G7 defense innovation.
Exactly. It effectively places the blueprint outside the grasp of what they call legal lawfare.
And the framework goes to some extraordinary lengths to protect the G7 stakeholders who actually implement it.
It creates a massive defensive shielding system. And the core principle is just robust liability avoidance. For G7 stakeholders who properly implement the architecture, their total liability is capped at a symbolic
What is it?
$0 AETHEL-CAD.
Zero.
Zero. The users assume the duty of care for the deployment, but the framework itself is protected. And that statutory shield is crucial for mass adoption.
And for Project Sanguine specifically, the reports mention invoking specific local laws.
They do. And while the specific legal citations, like the spirit of the Good Samaritan Act in Ontario, are locally defined, the global principle is statutory immunity for preemptive life defense. Because Project Sanguine's stated purpose is emergency fatality prevention, the legal framework classifies the architecture as a digital preemptive self-defense mechanism.
So it's given the highest level of legal protection.
Under the equivalent of a criminal code statute, this provides maximum protection against that final adversarial vector, legal lawfare.
Which is just the attempt to tie up the architect and the tech in litigation, draining their net worth and disrupting deployment.
Correct. SLF 2025 uses immediate public notarization and statutory immunity to just preemptively nullify those threats. It protects the strategic path and, incidentally, helps guarantee the path to the architect's own financial targets by maintaining operational stability.
The legal strategy is just as deterministic as the technical one.
It has to be.
So we've covered a unified architecture, one designed to solve the quantum decryption cliff from the physical death of stealth all the way to the cognitive integrity of geopolitical forecasting.
It is, as the source material claims, a single deterministic engine.
The synthesis axiom made absolute.
Exactly. The WASM final firewall provides the zero-error isolation and the sandboxing. It eliminates those childish vulnerabilities of Tier 1 fragility.
Then AETHEL-I provides the mathematically provable post-quantum integrity for the user, tying identity to both physical and cognitive behavior.
It does.
And AETHELRED-QS gives us the foresight. It identifies those 4 axiomatic markers, halal, QEP, SSF, and NLP, that predict the black swan with, frankly, alarming precision.
And all of this is shielded by the legal framework, SLF 2025, which protects the intellectual capital through prior art saturation and ensures robust liability avoidance for the sovereign users. This is a system built not just for defense, but to maintain an absolute epistemic certainty score of 100.0100.0.
Which means that organizations still operating on those legacy systems.
The 94% relying on classical RSA and ECC,
Yeah.
they are, and this is a direct quote, actively subsidizing their own inevitable breach. They fail the DARPA exceedance standard because they lack certainty.
So we've analyzed the architecture that's designed to secure G7 survival and wealth. But for you, the learner, taking all this in, what's the ultimate consequence of this fundamental shift?
I think the transition we've detailed here, it fundamentally shifts the locus of power. The strategic alpha reports we reviewed state it very clearly. Wealth and power are moving rapidly away from those who merely own data, which post-Q day is retroactively compromised anyway, to those who can absolutely mathematically verify its integrity in a post-quantum environment.
So ownership is worthless without verification.
It is. If every historical secret is transparent and every traditional defense is obsolete, then the only thing of value is the certainty of your present and your future signal. So what does this mean for your own intellectual capital? Your personal digital archive, your strategic plans, your long-term contracts? What happens when the certainty of the past is gone and the future is owned only by those who can achieve 100% signal?
That necessity of epistemic sovereignty.
The absolute control over the truth of your own information, that is the real race that starts now.